Uchiha's Rebellion, The Rise of Ruohuo. Episode 71. A heavy chicken leg. Most of the Uchiha went home. But Fugaku didn't. Behind him stood several Uchiha elites, waiting in front of Elder Danzo's mansion. An hour ago, under the escort of third generation and Umbu, Elder Danzo had returned to the mansion. Change clothes, take a bath, and give the last words to the clan members. Let's talk about it. Elder Danzo's last words are actually a bit much. I explained it to third generation outside Konoha for a long time, and after I came back, I explained it for more than an hour. Fugaku was indeed a little impatient. He hadn't even eaten dinner yet. The person at fault was Elder Danzo, who assassinated Wakahui and also took away the eyes of the Uchiha clan. Such crimes are too numerous to describe. But Fugaku could only wait. After all, this is also the last moment in Elder Danzo's life. Elder Danzo has confessed his crime, and he confessed his crime under force from the Uchiha clan. He can't urge the third generation to take action now, can he? Fugaku-kun, everyone. Suddenly, Fugaku heard a familiar voice, as gentle as water, which immediately dispelled the irritability in his heart. Mikoto, why are you here? Fugaku smiled from the bottom of his heart as he watched his wife walking towards him carrying a lunchbox. Mikoto-sama. Several Uchiha elites nodded and saluted. It's true of you that you don't want to eat, and you don't let everyone else eat. Come on, here are some cooked foods I bought. Let's eat them while they're hot. Mikoto opened the lunchbox, which contained the sushi and rice balls he had just bought, neatly arranged. There was also a large chicken drumstick in it, which looked a bit awkward. Why is there only one chicken drumstick? Fugaku raised his eyebrows. This is specially given to you by Obito-kun. Mikoto smiled softly and took out the big chicken drumstick and handed it to Fugaku. Thank you for bringing his brother back to the village. This child. Fugaku chuckled, and the sliding touch of his palm made him stunned for a moment. His wife was secretly writing on his hand with her fingers. Fugaku looked at his wife, who was smiling softly, and realized something. If Fire Lord and Five Tails are ready, they will destroy the Hyuga tribe tonight. These were the first words Mikoto delivered. This sentence also made Fugaku feel the weight of this chicken leg. This kid's way of thinking seems a little special. Fugaku smiled a little reluctantly. He kept checking with Mikoto with his eyes, but Mikoto shook his head and continued to slide it on his palm. He needs you to hold down the third generation and give him the signal. Drag and hold the third generation project? Signal? No. Are you serious? Indeed, the Uchiha clan is very at odds with the Hyuga clan. Not only children, but even adults sometimes say things like, sooner or later I will destroy the Hyuga clan. Especially when there is conflict. Even some Uchiha seniors talk after dinner about how to attack Hyuga. But as I said, don't make fun of tailed beasts. Tonight, inform the third generation that we agree to hand over the tailed beast, launch the tailed beast Jade, and destroy Hyuga. Mikoto passed the final information to her husband. Both husband and wife saw solemnity in each other's eyes. What about that kid? Fugaku smiled, why don't you see him coming? Obito-kun said that Orochimaru-sama is a guest at his home, and Wakahuo-kun and Grandma are entertaining him. Fugaku was silent. Orochimaru is a guest at Wakaki's house? At this time? Orochimaru is a student of the third generation and most likely the future fourth Hokage. He has been following Ruohuo every step of the way, obviously preparing for the next negotiation in advance. Even guiding Ruohuo and giving Five Tails to the village may not necessarily. Judging from the information passed on by his wife, Ruohuo at least knows about the upcoming negotiations and will most likely participate. So, is this guy serious? Chief Fugaku. While Fugaku was thinking, a middle-aged woman came out with a cold expression and an indifferent tone. Danzo-sama has reached the end of his life. In his last words, there was something he wanted to return to Uchiha, and asked Lord Fugaku to confirm that his death was true. Master Fugaku, if you don't mind, just come with me. The middle-aged woman turned away after speaking. It was as if the murderer of Danzo was Fugaku. Fugaku frowned. Several other Uchiha elites couldn't stand it anymore. They are obviously sinners, but they still pretend to be victims. That's right, the victims are obviously the Uchiha whose eyes were gouged out, and that kid Wakahu. Please show some restraint. Fugaku shouted, after all, he is an elder of Konoha. He has chosen to apologize. Look at the clan emblem on his body and maintain his dignity as a wealthy clan member. Several Uchiha were speechless. Fugaku breathed out, you guys wait here for a while. After saying that, Fugaku walked towards the middle-aged woman. Come to the main hall. Danzo was lying on a clean bedding, covered with a white sheet with the Shimura family crest printed on it. Several women were sobbing not far away, and several Shimura clan ninjas were glaring at Fugaku at the door. Fugaku frowned, and the word sorrow he wanted to say was directly cancelled by him. The third generation stood aside, sighed, and walked towards Fugaku. Fugaku, this is the Sharingan that Danzo asked me to hand over to you. Third generation gave Fugaku a box. Fugaku took it and opened it. Inside was a pair of eyes soaked in nutrient solution. It's a pair of 3 Magatama. The origin of these eyes. Well, I have always known about it, but because I was too sensitive, I kept it secret. Third generation sighed again and revealed a shocking secret. Third generation lord. Fugaku was very surprised. Let's talk as we walk, Fugaku. Third generation shook his head and walked out of the main hall. Fugaku looked back at the body of Elder Danzo, then glanced at the few Shimura clan members who were full of resentment in the room, frowned, and finally nodded. Condolences. After saying that, Fugaku stopped staying and turned around to follow third generation. The two of them walked to the door of the Shimura clan's house, and Fugaku motioned for the clan members and his wife to go back first. Looking at his wife's back, Fugaku became even more confused. I even forgot about the heavy chicken leg for a moment. Third generation lord, I don't understand. Fugaku frowned. It's okay if you don't understand, Fugaku. Third generation puffed out smoke. Just like back then, Danzo and I didn't understand why someone from the Uchiha tribe would suddenly assassinate second Hokage. Fugaku, Danzo's eyes were not stolen. This, I can assure you with Danzo's soul. Episode 72. Grandma's words and deeds. Under third generation's sincere description, Fugaku learned about an unknown past between Uchiha and second Hokage. This is a malignant incident that should have been buried in history. After first generation and Uchiha Madara established Konoha, Uchiha Madara announced her departure from Konoha due to different ideas. But at that time, Uchiha saw the hope of peace and did not want to continue to follow Uchiha Madara to live a war-torn life. After that, Uchiha Madara led 9 tails to attack Konoha, was defeated by the first generation, and was buried in Konoha. This result may have stimulated some Uchiha people. The seeds of hatred took root and sprouted, and the gears of fate began to turn. Finally one day, the hateful Uchiha found an opportunity. He was supposed to have died on the battlefield, but suddenly appeared with the intention of attacking second Hokage and avenging the former Uchiha clan leader. Of course he failed. But the second Hokage did not want to take his life, but instead influenced him with the strong will of fire. The Uchiha was so ashamed that he committed suicide. The debt was cleared after death, and the second Hokage also sealed the matter and buried it deep in history. But the Uchiha's eyes remained. The former leader of the Roots, Shimura Danzo, was blinded in his right eye during a certain mission, and his right arm was also severely injured. Elder Danzo didn't want to let himself become a useless person who made no contribution to the village, so he activated these forbidden eyes. That's the story anyway. Ruohuo didn't know if Fugaku believed it. Anyway, when Fugaku told him, he really believed. Elder Danzo is really a strong ninja. Ruohuo crossed his arms over his chest and nodded in agreement. His will of fire is the most special kind I have ever seen. You can make up such a story. Are you determined to deceive Fugaku? Fortunately, he was already prepared. Come on, try your best to deceive me, and let me see if Fugaku dares to agree to it. Brother is right, too. Obito and Shursui also agreed. Fugaku actually didn't want to dwell too much on this topic. As expected, third generation will hold a meeting to discuss the issue of Five Tails ownership. The reason is that the Five Tails pursuit army on the Iwagakure front has suspended its offensive. Third, Tsuchika Jinoki has sent a negotiation envoy and is expected to arrive in Konoha tomorrow for negotiations. Lord Hokage is planning to hold an internal pre-negotiation meeting tonight to clarify the direction of tomorrow's negotiations. Judging from the importance of the content of the meeting, this should have been decided by the third generation headquarters and the Elders' Council, and was the highest level meeting in Konoha. However, Elder Danzo had already apologized, and in his last words before apologizing, he named Uchiha to participate. Elder Danzo repeatedly emphasized that after his death, Konoha must fully respect Uchiha's opinions, make up for his mistakes, and not allow misunderstandings to deepen. And Five Tails is the trophy captured by Ruohuo, and it is a partnership beyond Jinchuriki. So Ruohuo needs to be there with him tonight. And the third generation project also hints at Fugaku. Ruohuo's opinion is very important, but given that he is still young and mentally immature, it is he, the clan leader, who makes the final decision. This made Fugaku relieved for a while. While he was very moved, he also felt unparalleled pressure. The past is over, and debts will be cleared after death. As Ruohuo said, Elder Danzo is a strong ninja who is dedicated to Konoha. Although he made a mistake, he apologized, and in order to prevent the tragedy from happening again, he also secured a lot of power for Uchiha in his last words. But the key. This little devil doesn't play by the rules. Well, why are you bombing Hyuga again? Fugaku always felt threatened. This is obviously because the kid himself is unwilling to hand over 5 tails. But Fugaku had a vague feeling that something was wrong. With this kid's character, would he do such a roundabout thing? Threatening himself, the leader of the clan, to save 5 tails? Shouldn't he just threaten Konoha with the tailed beast Jade? Wait, this seems to be more serious. It seems that you have understood that the will of fire and the will of darkness are compatible, Lord Ruohuo. Orochimaru, who was sitting next to Fugaku, smiled and said, this can be regarded as the wealth left by Elder Danzo after his death. Indeed. Fugaku agreed, darkness and light seem to be opposites, but they are also closely related to each other. There is no absolute right or wrong, and there is no irreconcilable contradiction. No matter when, you can gain more by forgiving your enemies than destroying them. Fugaku said the last sentence while staring at Ruohuo. If Orochimaru wasn't here, he could explain it more clearly. Ruohuo couldn't hold back his laughter and was about to pretend that he didn't understand when he heard his grandma suddenly speak. Little Fugaku. I seem to have heard your words from a senior when Konoha was first established. The words just fell. Fugaku and Orochimaru immediately sat up straight and looked at Grandma with serious expressions on their faces. The same is true for the 3 CBD brothers. Even Grandma calls her senior. Could it be a ninja from the first generation era? I remember that I was the first Hokage at the time and said something similar to that senior, saying that I should forgive my enemies and influence my opponents. Then the adult retorted to first Hokage, Grandma recalled. He said. The Uchiha clan has always been good at using fire style to forgive their opponents, but few people can bear it. That senior is right. Ruohuo agreed on the spot, if you want to be forgiven by the will of fire, you must be prepared to be baptized by the will of fire. Brother is right. Obito and Shursui shouted with arms raised. Well. Grandma nodded with satisfaction. Fugaku and Orochimaru looked at each other, each showing an awkward but polite smile. The case was solved. This boy's strange will of fire is indeed inseparable from words and deeds. Okay. Grandma waved her hand at this time, little Fugaku and this, young man, what are your names? My junior's name is Orochimaru, senior. Orochimaru responded politely. Oh, you two must have something to do with Ruohuo, right? Then don't delay, go quickly. Grandma waved her hand, try not to be too late. Children are still growing and need enough sleep. What about Hyuga? Senior, is this kid going to put the Hyuga to sleep collectively once he kills the tailed beast Jade? Fugaku was getting more and more anxious, but with Orochimaru here, he really couldn't speak. It shouldn't be too late, senior. Orochimaru smiled. Well. Grandma nodded. Fugaku also bravely agreed, I will try my best to bring Lord Ruohuo back as soon as possible, senior. There's no need to be so anxious. Grandma murmured. Business matters should always be handled well. Episode 73. Bang 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 in the conference room. Hokage building. Meeting room. It is now 9 o'clock in the evening. After many incidents and accidents throughout the day, the issue of the ownership of 5 tails has finally come to the negotiation table. The head of 3rd generation sat at the end of the long conference table, with 2 elders sitting on one left and one on the right. Orochimaru and Fugaku were sitting in the middle of the conference table. Ruohuo sat on the other side, looking at the 3rd generation project from a distance across the conference table. Ruohuo, you don't have to sit so far away. 3rd generation looked a little helpless. Ordinarily, if it wasn't for Fugaku to completely let down his guard, Ruohuo wouldn't even be qualified to serve. But the teacher said that this meeting will decide Kokuo's future. It is impossible for me to let my companions be wronged in the slightest. Ruohuo looked serious and went straight to the point. He knocked on the table again and added, protecting my companions well is my bottom line. 3rd generation took a puff of cigarette. First, he glanced at the 2 elders and found that the 2 old guys had a little displeasure on their faces, or they were suppressing their anger. Danzo is dead. Executed by his own hands, the chief of the Uchiha clan had personally identified it. In the morning, Konoha's top management had already held a meeting regarding the ownership of 5 tails. At that time, Danzo was still very ambitious and wanted to seal 5 tails even at the cost of a big fight. In the blink of an eye, it was fast forward to Danzo's funeral. They have been comrades for decades, and the two elders can still sit here calmly, sharing the same table with a brat. The overall situation is already the most important thing. Ruohuo. Third generation sighed secretly. No matter how much the two old guys used silence to put pressure on him, he had to pretend not to see it. The meeting must continue. What do you think about Kokuo? Third generation asked. Of course. Ruohuo's eyes widened, but please, Grandpa Hokage, please settle the payment for this mission for me first. I have a perfect plan, but I need some startup capital. The two elders frowned. Orochimaru kept smiling. Fugaku's brows were furrowed from the moment he entered the venue, and he was still thinking about what to say next. How Ruohuo got in touch with Five Tails, Fugaku didn't know. But after coming out of Ruohuo's house, especially after hearing his grandma's instructions, Fugaku was convinced that Ruohuo could definitely do what he said. Ruohuo said that he never let grandma down. So in this negotiation, what attitude should he adopt in response to the third generation project? First of all, Five Tails certainly cannot be handed over. But the third generation project has already hinted to him that it would be best to persuade Ruohuo to use Five Tails as a bargaining chip to negotiate with Iwagakure. The proceeds from the negotiation will also belong to Uchiha. Elder Danzo's apology and last words have built a bridge of understanding between Uchiha and the village. As long as he nods, the conflict between Uchiha and the village may gradually disappear. But similarly, the Hyuga tribe may also disappear. Orochimaru stayed with him all the way, and he didn't even have room to talk to Ruohuo. Fugaku also tried hinting, but the little bastard responded with an "I understand" look every time. It can be seen that this kid really wants to blow up Hyuga. Fugaku didn't dare to take risks, but he didn't dare to say it clearly either. After all, the idea of using tailed beasts to bomb Hyuga is actually no different from using tailed beasts to bomb a village. This requires Orochimaru to report to the third generation project. Wouldn't Elder Danzo apologize in vain? The third generation looked at Fugaku secretly. But he was shocked by the bitterness and hatred on Fugaku's face. Fugaku, could he be suspicious already? Otherwise, based on his understanding of Fugaku, after hearing Danzo's last words, he shouldn't have been like this. Is this because he wants Ruohuo to test his attitude? Third generation was thinking secretly, but before he could say anything, Koharu knocked on the table first and said coldly. This meeting is about tomorrow's negotiation with Iwagakure. Hokage, are you just going to waste your time with this brat? If that's the case, then I don't need to participate. You can let me know when you have coaxed the child. Humph. Mito Manabu, who moved to the bed opposite Koharu, also snorted coldly. In this situation, children should not. I said, who are you two? Maitaman Yen was mid-sentence when he was suddenly interrupted by Wakahuo. Ruohuo asked in a puzzled tone, isn't this meeting discussing Kokuo's future? What's going on with this old aunt and grandpa? Did you go to the wrong place? Lord Ruohuo. Fugaku just stopped him. Boom. I am an elder of Konoha, kid. Koharu slammed the table and pointed in the direction of the door. Now, get out of here immediately. This is not the place you should be. Koharu. Third generation Megong shouted to stop him. Boom. Ruohuo slammed the table. I've long been unhappy with you, old woman. Only a great ninja like Elder Danzo is worthy of being an elder of Konoha, so why are you sitting here? Ruohuo pointed to the door, get out of here. Okay. The third generation shouted loudly, then glared at the two elders angrily. Danzo had almost ruined a big thing for him, and he finally saved it at a huge cost. You two are thinking of bad things again. Five Tails are Ruohuo's companions, brought back from the battlefield. According to the wartime rules, they are also Ruohuo's trophies. If you two can't recognize this, then submit your resignation to the daimyo. Every ninja who fights bloody battles on the front lines of Konoha will not admit that there are elders like you. The third generation stood in front of the Uchiha clan leader and yelled at the two elders. Go to bed. Koharu and Maitaman Enato are both confused. No. Do you want to listen to what you're saying, monkey? It was Mito Menyen who reacted first. Something's wrong with Monkey today. Danzo is dead, and Monkey should be the one to attack the most, but the targets of the attack turned out to be him and Koharu. This is unusual. Could it be that Grandpa Hokage is right? At this time, Ruohuo suddenly shouted loudly, calling for third generation. Get off the table first. Fugaku couldn't help it anymore and shouted. Okay. Ruohuo got down from the table obediently and sat down. Looking at Orochimaru, the smile on Orochimaru's face remains elegant. Really interesting. Elder Danzo apologized and committed suicide, and the remaining 2 elders were scolded by Hokage in public and even asked to submit their resignations. In just one day, Konoha's top management was in such chaos. And the source of all this, in the final analysis, is a B-level rescue mission that does not exist. Ah. This world is really wonderful. Boom. 3rd generation Sama. Urgent report from the front. Suddenly, a Konoha ninja broke in. 3rd generation immediately looked at the ninja and said, "Say. The Iwagakure ninjas launched a surprise attack an hour ago, and the 4 Tails Jinchuriki used the tailed beast Jade to destroy our defenses." According to the report of the ninjas of the Hyuga clan, an Iwagakure force with no less than 2,000 people has crossed the border of the Land of Fire and is heading towards Konoha at full speed. 3rd generation Sama. Just as this ninja finished his report, another ninja rushed in. The Kumogakure ninjas launched a surprise attack an hour ago. They have already broken through our defenses. The frontline ninjas suffered heavy casualties. 3rd generation Sama. The 3rd ninja rushed over. The 3rd generation looked a little twitchy. Who is it this time? Is it Tsunegakure or Kirigakure? It's Uzumaki Kushina. Who? 3rd generation couldn't change his mind for a while. Who? Uzumaki Kushina Jonin left the village privately. She claimed that she would beat up 5 Tails and avenge Minato Jonin. The ninja who reported this time spoke softer. Boom. Ruohuo slammed the table, turned around and walked out of the conference room. How unreasonable is it to avenge a spy? Let me meet her. Episode 74. That big sister. I'll give you a ride. This was definitely not going to be a peaceful night. Iwagakure's firm determination to recover 5 Tails is beyond the imagination of Konoha's top brass. On the surface, they sent out a signal for negotiation, but in fact, they secretly gathered ninja troops. 4 Tails opened the way and forcibly broke through Konoha's blockade. Ruohuo once heard a theory in his previous life. In any battle, a unit that goes deep alone will not end well. Until there was a group of special rabbits who were not afraid of life and death. Because they were too poor, they could only use tactical interleaving to the extreme. They completed the Wuchang dungeon and opened the gate of heaven with one punch. Since then, going deep alone has gradually evolved into a brand new special beheading tactic. Of course, tonight's Iwagakure ninja was obviously a little crazy. The 2,000-strong Iwagakure force forced its way through Konoha's defense line. Part of it is used to counter the encirclement, and part of it is used to go straight to the Konoha base camp. There are tactics, but not many, but they are useful. It was foreseeable that Konoha was caught off guard, and many ninjas would be surrounded and captured by Iwagakure. And if Konoha chooses to demolish the east wall to repair the west wall in order to stop this Iwagakure force, then one improper operation may cause the entire defense line to collapse. Because the enemy of Konoha is not only Iwagakure now, there is also Kumogakure who launches a surprise attack with Iwagakure at the same time. Ruohuo actually has a lot of credit here. He and Orochimaru rushed to the Kanobi Bridge. It looked like a surprise attack, but in fact it was a disguised form that allowed Iwakaku to gather the ninja troops in advance. Afterwards, he ran away on 5 Tails, allowing Iwagakure to use the shortest time and the firmest determination to launch a large-scale gathering and pursuit. On the other hand, look at Konoha. Although they supported Iwagakure's front line in the shortest possible time, they lost the best defensive opportunity and were not as resolute as Iwagakure. That's why they were forced out of such a large gap under the bombing of 4 Tails. And the most important thing is, Konoha's golden decision-making period was delayed for a whole day by various accidents. First, there was the own accident of 5 Tails' attack on Konoha. Then the spy Minato attacked the Elder Danzo, which led to the deeds of the Elder Danzo were exposed, and finally chose to commit suicide to apologize. 3rd generation looked at Danzo as a guest star and delayed the whole evening. During this period, Iwagakure completed various strategic arrangements and cooperation negotiations with Kumogakure, and launched a full-scale raid an hour ago. These Yenin souls are starting to set fire to the mountain. If fire rides on a fire dragon and flies in the sky, you can see the fire in the distance even though it is far away. The distance from the border to Konoha is not close, it just doesn't seem that far at the feet of 5 Tails. You can see the fire from here, so you can imagine how big the fire is. This is also a delaying tactic, Mr. Ruohuo. Orochimaru, who was hanging under the fire dragon, said, "Fire can block the enemy troops on the flanks and cause a lot of trouble to the enemy. If the fire is too strong, it is equivalent to a continuous fire-style ninjutsu. If you want to force through the interception, you will always have to pay a price." Whether it is bypassing the fire site to intercept or put out the fire, it will consume time and require a lot of manpower. The frontline defensive front will inevitably be affected. Fighting in the enemy's territory can always easily put the opponent's commander into a dilemma. Orochimaru was calm enough to spread battlefield knowledge to Wakaka, as if he had forgotten that he was still running for Hokage. Then it's no wonder Hanzo Sanshuyu wants to launch the second ninja war. Ruohuo raised his eyebrows, suddenly understanding the demigod. A small country in a tiny place actually launched a war against 3 major ninja villages at the same time. But no. My own country is treated as a battlefield by others all day long, pushed, and rubbed again and again. Who can bear this? Nagato always said, you ninjas from big countries don't care about the feelings of small countries. Ruohuo felt it intuitively now. I support you, Nagato, cousin. Huh? Ruohuo suddenly spotted a figure on the ground with red hair, a long skirt, and a lot of umbu following behind him. However, these umbu seem to be a little timid. Although they are obviously not slower than this one, they keep their distance and don't dare to get close. Teacher, do you still have the chains? She seems to be in trouble. Let's take her for a ride. Orochimaru also noticed Kushina and pursed his lips. He especially wants to tell Ruohuo now, son, this woman most likely doesn't need your help. She's here to beat up your partner. But considering that his first task is to stabilize these two troubles, his purpose is to delay time. So Orochimaru agreed, of course, but it's not long enough, so it needs to go down a little bit. And are you sure you can bear the weight of 2 people? No problem, I brought eye drops. If Wa hadn't forgotten to give himself an eye-damaging buff, he wouldn't have told Orochimaru that his fire dragon bullet could at least carry 3 Akamichi Dingswa around Konoha several times. Hey! That red-haired big sister down there. Grab the chain and I'll take you for a ride. Ruohuo controlled the fire dragon to launch a dive. Kushina heard the sound and looked back. A boy was riding a fire dragon, hanging a man, and there was a chain hanging down? Wow, this is the world outside Konoha. Kushina's eyes suddenly lit up. Here. Quick. Whoosh. The fire dragon skimmed the ground at low altitude. Kushina firmly grasped the chain, and Ruohuo controlled it to make the fire dragon tremble, and then flew forward unsteadily. Woohoo! It's so exciting. Kushina was so excited that she even made faces at umbu behind her. When she first heard that Minato was yelled at like this by 5 Tails, Kushina was really angry and wanted to seek revenge from 5 Tails without even thinking about it. After running a certain distance, Kushina suddenly calmed down and seemed unable to leave the village. But everything is out. Ever since Grandma Mito sealed this big guy into her body, she hasn't seen the world outside Konoha for a long time. Then let's have some fun. Ho ho. Is that 5 Tails? Why is it a big dog? Huh? Why is it so bright over there so late? Kushina is like a curious baby. She has not left Konoha for a long time and is full of curiosity about everything. That's a battlefield over there, kid. The ninjas from Iwagakure are coming. Orochimaru smiled and deliberately avoided Kushina's name. It can be delayed for a while. This voice, huh? Kushina looked up. Lord Orochimaru? How did you? Kushina is a little panicked. Is Orochimaru-sama also here to capture her? Don't be nervous, kid. It's my disciple who wants to take you for a ride. I just handed him a chain. Orochimaru has a good impression of his disciple, and if he can't beat him later, he may be given a lighter punishment. That's it. Kushina looked surprised, waved to Ruohuo above and shouted. Thank you, young man. I'll treat you to ramen later. It's a deal, Ruohuo responded with a smile. Episode 75. Be honest. Kurama. The fire dragon swayed and flew towards the direction of Platycodon Mountain. Kushina was shouting and screaming, so excited. Orochimaru smiled and said nothing. Ruohuo also smiled and said nothing. The 3 of them were getting further and further away from Konoha, with umbu being thrown further and further behind them. After confirming that Orochimaru was also on top, they simply gave up the pursuit. Went back to the village to take orders. Not long after, the 3 Ruohuo finally arrived at 5 Tails. The people responsible for guarding 5 Tails are several Uchiha elites. They are gathered in front of a bonfire. 5 Tails is lying on the ground, looking at these descendants of Indra. The scene is actually a bit warm. Humph. Kushina has not forgotten her original intention of running out. Young man, just put me in front of that big guy, thank you. Ah? Is sister here to see Kokuo too? Ruohuo asked knowingly. Well, My little brother was righted by this big guy, eh? Kushina was mid-sentence when she suddenly found that the chain on her hand was loosened, and it was Lord Orochimaru who had let go of the chain. However, he only put down a small part. Orochimaru smiled and said, "Sorry, my hand slipped. It scared me to death." Kushina was still frightened. Wakaho Jundang, who was riding on the fire dragon, didn't hear it. He controlled the fire dragon to put Kushina down, and then flew to the top of Kokuo's head under Kushina's gaze. Orochimaru did not follow Wakahui or Kushina this time, but chose to land next to a group of Uchiha. Orochimaru-sama. The Uchiha people stood up one after another. Orochimaru's status in Konoha was not low, and he was also Wakahui's teacher, and his reputation in the Uchiha clan was also very high. "Everyone, it may not be too safe here for a while. If you believe me, you might as well move to the other side temporarily." All the Uchiha looked at each other, and before they could react, they saw the red-haired woman who had just left not far away walking over, rolling up her sleeves and looking menacing. "Hey! Big guy, it was you who bullied my little brother, right?" Kushina shouted. Five Tails Kokuo puffed out from his nostrils. "Indra, I feel some of Kurama's chakra from this human being, but it seems to be controlled by a very strong seal." Well, the reincarnation of Azura sealed it with a slap of wood style. Counting the time, that was more than 40 years ago. While Ruohuo responded to Five Tails, he did not forget to call Kushina from a distance, "Big sister, what is your little brother's name?" Kushina put her hands in front of her mouth and shouted, "His name is Namikaze Minato." "Boy, get out of the way, I want to avenge my little brother." "Nanny?" Ruohuo said, surprised, "So the guy who wants to avenge the spy is you?" "Spy?" Kushina also looked surprised, but Minato is not a spy. He wanted to assassinate Danzo Elder and was arrested by the Konoha Security Department in the afternoon. "You can ask them." Kushina then looked at the Uchiha in front of her. These Uchiha are the elites who first followed Fugaku out of the village. They were by his side when Fugaku used Genjutsu Hypnosis Minato. But the situation is like this. "Everyone, time may be running out." Orochimaru smiled and gestured, "This way, please." Several Uchiha looked at each other, but after all, they still couldn't give a definition of whether Minato is a spy. Under Orochimaru's guidance, the figure flashed and temporarily came to the side. "Eh? Why are you leaving?" Kushina was wondering, Minato would assassinate Elder Danzo? No way. He is so timid. Could it be that he heard himself secretly swearing at someone last time? But what she was scolding was third generation. "Lord Orochimaru, did Minato really assassinate Danzo Elder?" Kushina asked Orochimaru for help. Orochimaru kept smiling, yes and no. "Ah?" In the eyes of Lord Wakaho, Minato did assassinate Elder Danzo, and Lord Minato is still a spy in Lord Wakaho's eyes. "Nanny?" Kushina was really shocked now. Master Orochimaru definitely didn't lie to her. The boy named Ruohuo helped her run out so far, so he was obviously a good person. So that boy Minato is really. But in the eyes of people other than Wakaho-kun, Minato-kun did not assassinate Elder Danzo, nor was he a spy. Orochimaru continued to smile and said, "It depends on your relationship with Wakahara-kun, and whether you can recognize Wakahara-kun's will of fire. The same thing, starting from different angles, can lead to different conclusions. No one can say whether these conclusions are right or wrong, they just have different perspectives." "So Kushina, what is your conclusion?" Forehead. Kushina was a little dizzy. But Ruohuo didn't faint. "Kokuo, put some pressure on her." "Understood." Kokuo immediately blew out a large amount of steam from his nostrils. After Orochimaru felt the temperature of the steam, the interest in his eyes increased instead of decreasing. He raised his fingers and prepared to run away. At the same time, he did not forget to remind. "Follow your heart, Kushina." Whoosh. Orochimaru disappeared. Kushina looked weird. He looked up at Five Tails who had already stood up, muttering, "You must be crazy," and saw that Ruohuo had already made a seal with his fingers in front of him, so he also made a seal of opposition. Roar. Five Tails activated his most talented skill, Five Tails Roar. Don't underestimate this move. Although it doesn't have any technical content, Orochimaru, White Fang, Minato, and Danzo have all suffered injuries of varying severity due to this move. But for Kushina. Too noisy, big guy. Kushina's red hair was blown by the wind, but her body did not retreat even half an inch. Chakra surged wildly, and she clapped her hands violently, King Kong blockade. The two chakra chains immediately shot toward Five Tails, growing longer in the air, and aimed at Five Tails' two front hooves. "No need to hide, Kokuo." Ruohuo said calmly, let her tie it up, whatever she wants. Whizzing. 2 chains tied Five Tails' front hooves, but Five Tails fell down in the next second, pressed down with his whole body, and actually brought Kushina forward. In fact, Kushina was stable at first. But the moment her Vajra blockade bound Five Tails, 2 chakras suddenly connected to her conscious space, causing her to lose consciousness for a moment, and then she stumbled forward 2 steps. Huh? How did you come here? Kushina's mind stands in the sealed space. Behind it is 9 Tails imprisoned in a cage, in front of it is 5 Tails crawling on the ground, and Ruohuo above its head. The 2 chains became a bridge, connecting the mental spaces of both parties. Ruohuo said nothing, but glanced at Kushina coolly, and then his eyes came to 9 Tails behind her. Roar. 9 Tails let out an extremely ferocious roar. It didn't want any tailed beast to see it in such a miserable state. Kushina frowned and was about to turn around and yell, but she heard Ruohuo on the other side of 5 Tails suddenly shouted coldly. Be honest, Kurama. Episode 76. 9 Tails, Indra. Help me destroy the seal. Quick. Ruohuo's voice exploded throughout the sealed space. The eyes flashed with scarlet light, and the pupil power with the brand of Indra penetrated the cage of 8-sign seal and went straight to 9 Tails. It was different than when I first met 5 Tails. 8-sign seal space is also a spiritual space. Although this is Kushina's home court, Sharingan's power can obviously be put to better use. This time, 5 Tails and 9 Tails have a clearer perception of Ruohuo's eye power and Indra's brand. Indra. 9 Tails was a little in disbelief. Compared to the 5 Tails that had just broken free from the seal, the current 9 Tails is obviously less chaotic. Ruohuo first made a stop gesture to 9 Tails, flew from 5 Tails' head to Kushina, and shook his hand. Kushina? No respond. Pepper? Still no response. Red-haired tomato? Still no response. That's stable. I didn't expect Sharingan to be so useful in the spiritual space. Eliminating the invasion step and connecting directly, the effect seems to have increased a lot. So in the future, when we recognize other tailed beasts, maybe we can ask Kushina? He is connected to him on the left, and other Jinchuriki and Kushina are connected to the right. I feel like I can control each one accurately. Not bad. Ruohuo nodded with satisfaction. After confirming that Kushina had been charged, he turned to look at 9 Tails, looked around, shook his head, and said with some ridicule. A little embarrassed, Kurama. 9 Tails, who was full of tsundere attributes, rarely became angry after hearing this. It stared at Ruohuo's 3 Magatama and remained silent for a long time. Still unable to deny Indra's chakra, it spoke in a complicated tone. You are not the same Indra I remember, Indra. This response is a bit awkward, but it is indeed Kurama's intuitive feeling now. Everywhere looks like Indra. No. If you close your eyes and just feel this chakra, this is Indra. The old man only had these 2 sons, so it was impossible for him to remember them wrongly. But looking at it. In addition to strength, he also lost a lot of things in reincarnation, but he also gained a lot, Kurama. Kokuo spoke in a complicated tone and explained. This actually helped Ruohuo save some energy. This is no longer the world I know. What I used to be like no longer matters. Ruohuo waved his hand and said openly, let's get to know each other again. I am Indra who has awakened from reincarnation. I am also the ninja of the Uchiha clan, Uchiha Ruohuo. This world has been polluted by humans and turned into chaos. I decided to re-establish a new order for this world and restore the glory of the ninja sect era. Kurama, will you assist me? Ruohuo told 9 Tails the same words again. But the situation of 9 Tails is obviously more complicated than that of 5 Tails. 5 Tails broke out of the sealed space by himself. And now 9 Tails is separated from him by an 8-sign seal. Of course, Indra, help me remove this damn seal first, quickly. The more 9 Tails talked, the more excited he became. How dare you seal me for so long? I want to kill this woman, and then kill all the bastards in Konoha. Kill them all. 9 Tails' murderous intent was as strong as stress. In the sealed space, the water surface representing Kushina chakra was splashed with ripples by 9 Tails' murderous intent. Ruohuo suddenly felt something bad and retreated decisively, flying back to 5 Tails' head. Before 9 Tails could react, he saw that the hateful red-haired woman finally woke up and said with some displeasure, "Why are you still so noisy, big fox? Oh no." Kurama? Ruohuo could see clearly. With Kushina's awakening, the influence that 9 Tails had on outside the seal disappeared directly. The water surface inside the seal rippled, but there was no fluctuation outside the seal. What a strong seal. Five Tails also discovered that this was not on the same level as the seal it encountered in Han's body. And this woman's chakra also has a strong restraining effect on me and Kurama. Ruohuo didn't respond. In Kushina's conscious space, she can't have private conversations with Five Tails. Not only him, but also what Five Tails wants to express is open to the outside. You don't deserve to call me by my name. Woman. Nine Tails was touched and went into rage mode, completely crazy. Indra, please help me destroy the seal. I will kill this woman with my own hands. Roar. Nine Tails roared again. But Kushina obviously didn't take it seriously. She stretched out her slender finger and lightly scratched Nine Tails. What I call you is my business, don't keep yelling. Boom. A red torii gate, the same style as the Myojin gate, fell from the sealed space, accurately hitting Nine Tails' neck and pressing Nine Tails' head to the water. Boom boom boom. Torii gates fell down one after another, locking Nine Tails' tail and limbs one after another. Have a good sleep. Really, after teaching for so long, I still have no manners at all. Kushina looked at Kushina, who just moved her fingers and pressed Nine Tails to the ground and rubbed it. Ruohuo suddenly regretted that he had mentioned his Ninja World Security Department plan to Nine Tails so early. This Nine Tails' temper was too bad. He got stressed out for no reason, and even disturbed Kushina's chakra, causing Kushina to wake up immediately. If I had known earlier, I would have ordered chakra and built this tailed beast herd first. Kushina is really not that easy to deal with Jinchuriki, even though he has a Sharingan. Chakra is a combination of physical energy and mental energy, with chakra senju and whirlpool, and is born with a certain resistance to Genjutsu. Otherwise, there would be nothing to do with senju during the war. Uchiha walked down the road in twos and twos, one person controlled the other's archer shuriken, and he had already pushed it. But Ruohuo actually never thought about going against Kushina. He's not a big bad guy. No grievances, but for the sake of an arrogant fox, you have to kill people? Even if there is going to be a war with Konoha, that is not a matter now. The current 5-year plan is development and confrontation with Konoha. That is the third 5-year plan, which is still far away. Although there is a high probability that I can't beat him now. Hey, little guy, why do you know the name of this big fox? After cleaning up Nine Tails, Kushina is ready to clean up Ruohuo. Episode 77. Kurama not only suffered the seal, but also the long-term abuse by this woman. Wakahara stared at Kushina with squinted eyes. Kushina definitely didn't know she was hit by Genjutsu. Otherwise, her hair would be flying by now, and Kushina couldn't bear those taboo words. Kushina also stared at Ruohuo with squinted eyes. She has been getting along with Nine Tails for so many years. Every time she comes here, Nine Tails doesn't communicate with her at all except yelling and saying some very annoying things. This must be the first time this little guy has come here. But why does the big fox seem to have a good relationship with him? In addition to curiosity, Kushina was also a little jealous. Tailed beasts all have their own names, you just don't know them. Ruohuo crossed his arms across his chest and said coolly, only the purest will of fire can be recognized by the tailed beast, and your will of fire, huh? I don't want the approval of this big fox. Kushina muttered and looked back at the hypnosis, Nine Tails. This big fox only looked cute when sleeping. So are you planning to help this big fox break the seal? Kushina turned around, her tone becoming a little dangerous. Ruohuo's expression was serious, he thought about it seriously, nodded first, and then shook his head. Tailed beasts all long for freedom, so in order to gain their power, they are sealed within their bodies. This is a very bad practice. This is what I said to Five Tails. This Indra still cares about the rights of tailed beasts, so please rest assured, babies. But now Kurama seems to have a very bad personality, always thinking about killing people, etc. This is a bit difficult to handle. Ruohuo ignored Kushina's dangerous gaze and patted Kokuo's horns. Kokuo, was Kurama so irritable before? Kokuo thought for a while, I haven't seen it for a long time, but tailed beasts and humans were not enemies from the beginning. We have both lived in peace with humans and helped humans solve many disasters. But since humans betrayed us, Kokuo snorted from his nostrils, we hate betrayal, and we also started to hate humans and hate humans. Kurama has been sealed for too long. It is normal for him to hate and hate humans. Kushina pursed her lips, thoughtfully, after listening to Five Tails' words. Grandma Mito also told her something similar. Probably something like, Nine Tails' power is too dangerous, but we need to use this power to protect our homeland. At that time, Kushina felt it was unfair. It's not only unfair to Nine Tails, it's also unfair to her. She doesn't want to be a Nine Tails Jinchuriki. After 9 tails lived in her body, she yelled and screamed all day long. At first, she felt that this big fox was quite pitiful, but over time, this feeling was reflected in 9 tails yelling. Fated. I see. Ruohuo nodded, frowned and looked at Kushina, and then at 9 tails, behind Kushina. Kurama was not only sealed, but also suffered long-term abuse from this woman. That's why he became so violent and wanted to kill all humans. Ruohuo labeled Kushina an animal abuser. This may be something that no woman can accept. I didn't abuse the big fox. Kushina muttered dissatisfied, but every time it sees me, it yells and doesn't listen to what I say. After hearing it, it scolds me again, and the scolding is very unpleasant. What can I do? Ruohuo couldn't deal with Kushina's aggrieved look. He was also thinking about provoking Kushina and putting more pressure on him to see if he could get Kushina to mobilize the 9 tails chakra. Anyway, he can fly, so he's not afraid of getting beaten. As for 5 tails. Kushina can only restrict 5 tails anyway, so she can't seal 5 tails into her body, right? But look at it now. Well, actually, Kurama's own personality has some problems. Ruohuo said, it is different from Kokuo. I think it seems to be easily stressed. The aunt who has a dog next door said that this kind of situation is caused by being locked up for too long, accumulating too much energy, and being too strong. Need to vent. Vent? Kushina was stunned for a moment. She wanted to say that she had actually been locked up in Konoha for a long time, but Ruohuo was likened to a dog, so. How to vent? Can you use Kurama's chakra? Shoot tailed beast jade or something. As soon as Wakahuo finished speaking, he was stunned for a moment. Launch the tailed beast jade. Tailed beast jade. Oh ho. It's okay, but I've never been allowed to use the 3rd generation project. And are you sure you want to do this? Kushina frowned and said, the big fox doesn't like me very much when I use its power. It yells and screams for a long time every time. Ruohuo blinked and pointed behind him. I have a way to let Kurama vent at will, in all kinds of ways, and Grandpa 3rd generation can't control it. Do you want to try it? Did I say something wrong? The scene returned to the foot of Platikodon Mountain. As soon as Kushina stood up from the ground, Ruohuo shouted. You are a vicious woman who abuses tailed beasts like this. What's the difference between you and those evil ninjas from Iwagakure? Orochimaru, who was not far away, was slightly startled. Why did the conversation between the two suddenly change the topic? Now we begin to discuss the issue of tailed beasts? Of course Orochimaru would not think that Kushina binding Kokuo with 2 chakra chains was abusing the tailed beast in Wakahui's eyes. This kid must have discovered the 9 tails in Kushina's body. So 9 tails also used the same method to seek help from Wakahuo-kun? Orochimaru narrowed his eyes, feeling something bad. And this time. As I said, I did not abuse the big fox. Kushina couldn't hold back her anger at all. Chakra surged all over her body, her red hair flew wildly, and she had already entered devil pepper mode. Kid, I have to educate you today. Nanny. Ruohuo looked shocked. How come you have such a strong will of fire? You, who on earth are you? Humph, are you scared? Kushina geared up and introduced herself with a proud look on her face. Listen up. Sister, I am Uzumaki Kushina, the first female Hokage in Konoha in the future. Hokage? Humph. Don't be ridiculous. Hokage wouldn't see Konoha ninjas being bullied on the battlefield, while he hides at home and abuses the tailed beasts. Orochimaru was shocked. Don't you dare me to go to the battlefield and defeat the evil Iwagakure ninja. Uzumaki Kushina. Ruohuo issued a challenge. Orochimaru is shocked again. Humph. You're quite brave, kid, then lead the way. I also agree with your will of fire. Kushina raised her hand and immediately fired a chain towards Five Tails' horns. Five Tails raised his head and swung Kushina above his head. As soon as Kushina landed, she saw Orochimaru rushing up to Five Tails before they got up. Wakeo-kun, Kushina. Orochimaru smiled gracefully. If it's convenient, can you bring me one? Episode 78. Uchiha also needs roots of his own. Boom. Boom. Five Tails runs wildly across the land. The speed was far more than 70 miles, but Ruohuo didn't feel so comfortable. Orochimaru is too fast. Last time he went to catch Minato, he didn't have time to catch up. I didn't expect to be so decisive this time. If Orochimaru follows me, I feel a little bit reluctant to let go. Ruohuo complained secretly. I glanced at Kushina and found that Kushina was even more nervous. I don't know if it's because it's the first time I've done this, but I'm sweating. But Orochimaru didn't say anything from beginning to end. Just stood there, smiling and saying nothing. It feels like a heartless smile machine. Then don't worry, just take it one step at a time. Ruohuo raised his eyebrows. Iwagakure came over, and Kumogakure also launched a sneak attack. The situation is already very serious for Konoha. Although Konoha will definitely be able to hold on in the end, it is foreseeable that Konoha's losses will not be low. A situation like this is the best time to gain military exploits. They all kill enemies, and they all cause damage with one shot of tailed beast Jade. But it means different things in different scenarios. When he ran away from Iwagakure before, that was the icing on the cake at best. No matter how much he bullied Iwagakure, the higher-ups would only notice the Kokuo he brought back. But now the situation is very different. The front line was breached and there were faint signs of collapse. He and Five Tails fell from the sky, defeated Iwagakure and defeated the Four Tails Jinchuriki, and also saved the Konoha ninjas on the front line. This kind of military exploits can only be effective if you practice them. And if Hu doesn't plan to do it by himself, it's best to bring all Uchiha with him. The first genius of Five Tails and Uchiha followed Nine Tails Jinchuriki to go to the front line privately. Third generation currently has no extra ninjas to mobilize. Ruohuo thought secretly. There is no one in Konoha now, and the third generation project must either go up on its own, or it can only unblock Uchiha. If Fugaku can't even seize this opportunity, then he can go and accompany Danzo. Danzo is definitely not dead, only the title and position of Elder Danzo is dead. If others are unclear, how can he be unclear? Third generation Mi and Danzo used retreat to advance, and the roots were completely integrated into the darkness. They also slapped Fugaku with their hands. Not to mention winning, at least they didn't suffer a loss. If Fugaku really didn't have this ability, he would just fake his death and escape into the darkness with Danzo. Uchiha also needs its own roots. I just don't know if the system can admit it. Ruohuo smacked his lips and thought. The system's A-level family mission is to join the Roots/Umbu, which is said to penetrate into Konoha. Rooting is out of the question right now, but Umbu. It seemed like he was almost shut out. After all, he behaves so cheerfully and doesn't seem to meet the conditions for joining Umbu. It would be great if this mission could be changed to join the security department. Ruohuo thought secretly, but after thinking about it, he knew it was impossible. There is Mangekyo with a guaranteed A-level reward. He was originally Uchiha's ninja. After completing the first two tasks, he basically locked in the title of Uchiha's #1 genius. If you want to enter the Konoha security department, it's just a matter of looks. It's strange that the system can give you this task. What? Kushina took Ruohuo to the front line? Nonsense. After a day of exhaustion from third generation, he lost control of his emotions again and almost smashed the big pipe that his wife had given him as a 30th birthday gift. At present, Konoha's defense is already empty, and these two strategic weapons have left the village privately. What if something happens? What if the village is taken advantage of? Orochimaru, haven't you been following Ruohuo? How could you let him do such a thing? Third generation looked at the shadow clone that Orochimaru rushed back. Orochimaru is still very stable in his work. This time, Fan kept up with Ruohuo and was not left behind. He used shadow clone to report the situation, which also eliminated the possibility of the teacher making another mistake. The situation may be a bit complicated at that time, teacher. Orochimaru's shadow clone also has the same elegance and calmness as its main body, and calmly explained. The kid and Kushina had a fierce battle at first, because of Minato. As for the scale of the battle, Orochimaru paused. He didn't lie, he just left room for the teacher's imagination. Third generation followed Orochimaru's words and thought about it. As expected, he was stunned for a moment and asked, what then? Then they recognized each other's will of fire, but there was another conflict about becoming a Hokage. Finally, Ruohuo proposed that becoming a Hokage is to protect everyone, including the ninjas on the front line. Kushina fully agreed with this, so. I don't know which of Orochimaru's words touched me. The third generation project was silent. After a long moment, he looked up at Orochimaru, so this is the reason why you didn't stop them? Orochimaru smiled slightly. This is the reason why I went with you, teacher. Didn't you do the same thing when we were 3 children? Third generation looked stunned. Killer. Although I don't know what Orochimaru was talking about specifically, third generation has done its best to train its 3 disciples. When Orochimaru said this, third generation immediately thought of his younger self. But soon he realized something was wrong. When I was young, I had enough strength to protect my disciples. But now Orochimaru, the 2 people he wants to protect. Someone is coming. Third generation is about to send people for reinforcements now. But seeing the Umbu appearing in front of them, third generation suddenly thought that the ninjas still staying in Konoha seemed. At this time. Dong dong. Third generation Sama. A steady voice sounded from outside the door. It was Fugaku, who had just left the Hokage building and returned. Fugaku? Third generation recognized Fugaku's voice immediately. Because of the attacks by Iwagakure and Kumogakure, the issue of the ownership of Five Tails came to an end for the time being, and the subsequent emergency battle meeting was not in the same order as the powers of the Konoha Security Department, so Fugaku left first. Now it suddenly comes back. It's the leader of the Fugaku clan whom I asked to inform, teacher. Orochimaru's clone answers questions for the third generation. The third generation frowned slightly and looked at Orochimaru. He asked Orochimaru with his eyes why he acted rashly this time. In this regard, Orochimaru still smiled calmly. Konoha needs someone to take charge. You can't go to the battlefield in person, teacher. Episode 79. Kokuo, come with a big one. As Five Tails sprinted tirelessly, the fire that could only be seen in Konoha gradually came into full view. When they came to a mountain peak with a better view, Ruohuo discovered that the battlefield in the distance was different from what he had imagined. The fire is not in one place, nor in two places. After the Iwagakure ninjas broke through, they immediately spread out, crossing horizontally, directly igniting every forest in their path. Dozens of fire sites are burning with raging flames. Once the connection is completed, the fire will span dozens of kilometers, which is comparable to 10 Uchiha Madaras releasing powerful fire at the same time. It's not like Ruohuo has never set fire to mountains. But that was the Chunin test, venting his anger towards the third generation, which was also a single ninjutsu. Compared with the sea of fire in front of me, it was on a pediatric level. This is the disadvantage of too high a vegetation rate. The Iwagakure ninja probably used earth style to change the terrain, fill in the rivers, or bury them underground. Orochimaru concluded, they want to use this fire to block the return of Konoha ninjas, so that they can march all the way into the heart of the land of fire. As he said that, Orochimaru took out another map from his ninja bag, spread it out, and laid it flat on Five Tails' head. Our current location is here, about 70 kilometers away from the nearest fire scene. Orochimaru pointed to the smaller fire scene. The flames were not big, but there were many trees. It was obviously just ignited. If nothing else, there will be a group of marching Iwagakure ninjas there. Ruohuo looked at the fire filling the sky in front of him and looked out again. The thick smoke obscured his sight, making it difficult to see the situation in the distance. His biggest target on this trip, the 4 Jinchuriki, Old Z, should be behind this black smoke. So, do we need to put out the fire first? Kushina frowned. If you let this fire continue to burn, it might not be good. Orochimaru did not respond, but looked at Ruohuo. Ruohuo shook his head. Rather than extinguishing the fire, I think it would be better to extinguish the Iwagakure ninja who set the fire. Hearing this answer, Orochimaru's smile became stronger. That's a good idea, Wakahokuin. Orochimaru pointed to the distance again, where another group of obviously man-made fire had just appeared. But the enemy's tactics may cause their positions to be somewhat scattered. Does Lord Ruohuo plan to find them one by one? This is obviously an immersive war lesson. Orochimaru is guiding Ruohuo's thinking, hoping that Ruohuo will find the most correct way. But teacher, shouldn't they be the ones who come to me? Wakahuo spread his hands and said matter-of-factly, isn't this fire they set just to buy time to get closer to Konoha and capture Kokuo back? Saying that, ignoring Orochimaru's approving gaze, Ruohuo patted Kokuo's horns. Kokuo, give me a big one. Poof. Kokuo understood the idea, sprayed steam from his nostrils, opened his mouth, the black and purple yin chakra and the blue yang chakra gathered together, and kept compressing. A black-tailed beast jade quickly condensed. Ruohuo's command is big. So Five Tails Muachaku prepared for 30 seconds. This is a super large-tailed beast jade with a diameter of more than 10 meters. A little bit to the left, a little to the left, a little bit down, right. Ruohuo and Kokuo's thoughts connected, and the 3 Magatama determined the final direction. Ruohuo stamped his feet violently. Let go. Call. The tailed beast jade was launched fiercely, and a vacuum zone was created all the way in the air, and it crashed steadily into a sea of fire, followed by a thunderous bombing sound. Boom. The dark night seemed to be shattered by the sound of bombing. The flames of the explosion even once covered the sea of fire, and the airwaves set off also extinguished the fire in a large area. The power of the explosion was comparable to the violent wind set off by dozens of A-level wind escapers at the same time. This firefighting efficiency is so good. Ruohuo raised his eyebrows and aimed in another direction. Kokuo, is it possible to hit the tailed beast jade from this distance? Ruohuo gave a thumbs up, blinked his left and right eyes wildly to measure the distance, and felt that it was more than 100 kilometers. Of course, but it will take a while. Five Tails answered in the affirmative and began to condense the tail beast jade. Ruohuo wasn't worried that the tailed beast jade wouldn't be able to hit it that far. After third Raikage died in the battle, 4th generation AI asked Killer Bee to stay in Yunlei Gorge from now on. If anyone dares to attack, he will directly launch the long-range tailed beast jade. This advanced tactical concept was extended all the way, and finally, Kumogakure actually developed a super chakra cannon that can even crush the moon. It's a bit outrageous. But the idea is right. Ruohuo glanced at Orochimaru and didn't know if he was interested in developing in this direction. Although the tailed beast claims that its strength is not judged by the number of tails. Wakahuo didn't know how long it would take for 8 tails to launch the long-range tailed beast. Anyway, 5 Tails Kokuo only held it in for 30 seconds this time, and then fired a tailed beast jade into the distance. It was a forest completely covered by a sea of fire, and Ruohuo was not worried about the presence of his own ninjas. Although they don't care much, according to Ruohuo's plan, after tonight, these ninjas will be responsible for being grateful to him. Boom. Another loud noise tore through the night sky. But Ruohuo didn't appreciate the power of the tailed beast jade this time. Standing high and seeing far, even though he didn't have Byakugan's sight range, Ruohuo could already see the Iwagakure ninjas gathering from all directions from a distance. They finally found out, Mr. Ruohuo. Orochimaru smiled slowly, not only them, your tribe should also be able to discover us. Ah? Ruohuo was stunned for a moment. You heard that right. Orochimaru patted Wakahui on the shoulder. I convinced the teacher and asked Chief Fugaku to lead the security department to dispatch urgently to support our operation. If Iwagakure can be repelled tonight, then the Uchiha clan will have saved the entire Konoha, Wakahokuan. Ruohuo blinked, feeling a little surprised. What Orochimaru said was not an exaggeration at all. Although with Konoha's overall strength, it is not difficult to save this battle, it will definitely not be easy, and it will cost a lot. This desperate move by the Iwagakure ninja can be called a crazy operation, and it is not something that can be undone. But what Ruohuo never expected was Orochimaru actually took the initiative to convince the 3rd generation project to let Uchiha participate in the war. This operation is a bit of a timely help. Ruohuo has been a little worried that Fugaku didn't dare to go to the Hokage building to volunteer. After all, this guy was only thinking about avoiding suspicion on Nine Tails night. What do you mean the Uchiha clan saved Konoha? Kushina next to her was unhappy and muttered dissatisfiedly, I'm obviously here too. Ruohuo raised his eyebrows. It seems that little Pepper is very willing to challenge. Don't worry. I have another great use for your chakra. Episode 80. Only the tailed beasts can call me Indra. Roar. Accompanied by a clear and loud roar, under the gaze of all the Iwagakure ninjas who crossed into the land of fire. 5 Tails jumped down from the mountain. With its huge body and strong body, it launched a charge towards the sea of fire in the distance. Although it is a good choice to stand on the top of the mountain and wait for Iwagakure to attack on his own. Several tailed beast jade shots are fired in short and rapid bursts, and the 5-kill notification sound is numb. But Iwagakure is definitely not a fool, and he has to give Fugaku and the others a chance to perform, right? Ruohuo had no intention of taking all the credit. What he wants is much bigger than this. Not long after Shursui entered the battlefield, he evolved into Instant Shursui. He is Shursui's eldest brother after all. This kind of treatment allows the enemy to choose to retreat when they meet, and can voluntarily give up the mission. After all, you have to fight for it, right? Tonight is a great opportunity. Ruohuo didn't leave Kushina idle either. Puff. Shadow Clone number 1 appeared and walked up to Kushina. Sister Kushina, can you call me Kurama? I'll borrow some chakra from it. Ah? Kushina was stunned for a moment. This was the first time she heard such a request. The same goes for Orochimaru, this tailed beast chakra, can I still borrow it? Why do you feel that Ruohuo and Nine Tails have a good relationship? Orochimaru couldn't help but think about the brief encounter between the two. Although he didn't know what happened specifically, it was obviously richer than what he saw. I'll ask it, please wait. Maybe because it felt quite fresh, Kushina didn't refuse, and her mind came to the sealed space. She looked at Nine Tails fixed on the ground, and remembered Ruohuo's words about abusing tailed beasts, and unbearable flashed in her eyes. Raising her hand, Kushina slightly lifted the seal around Nine Tails' neck. Nine Tails immediately opened his bell-like eyes and stared at Kushina. First of all, Big Fox, it's the little guy Ruohuo who wants to borrow some chakra from you, so don't yell. If you understand, just blink. Although Kushina can also directly mobilize part of Nine Tails' chakra, Ruohuo's words have reminded her. Tailed beasts are not evil, and their hostility towards humans also comes from betrayal. If you want to be recognized by tailed beasts, you must at least have enough respect. At least Kushina is quite envious of the way Ruohuo gets along with Five Tails Kokuo. Nine Tails still stared at Kushina, insisting not to blink. I won't listen to anything from you, eh? Ruohuo? Why does this name sound like Indra? Damn it, why hasn't Indra destroyed the seal yet? Is it because you haven't regained your strength yet? So you need to use my power to break the seal? Yes, that must be the case. This stupid woman was indeed deceived by Indra. No, deceiving people does not seem to be Indra's character. What exactly is the situation? Thinking like this, Nine Tails blinked unconsciously. Kushina suddenly smiled excitedly. This is the first time she has effectively communicated with this big fox. Raising his hand, the torii gates disappeared. Nine Tails immediately regained his freedom. He instinctively wanted to yell to vent his anger, but when he thought that Indra was still waiting, he held back. Let's talk first, woman, my power is lent to Indra, not to you. Nine Tails stretched out its claws and touched the prison that sealed it. I know. Kushina, who was still in a state of excitement, immediately passed the chakra's exit approval and said, let's go now, Big Fox. Five Tails on the head. Ode. A blood-red chakra code appeared all over Kushina's body, and she entered Three Tails mode directly. It agreed, but only gave so much. Kushina opened her eyes, and her pupils had turned into the same vertical pupils as Nine Tails. Ruohuo blinked blankly. Three Tails, is this called only giving so much? Is this chakra? Every tail is clearly a sincere ambition of Nine Tails. Well, for Kushina, these chakra don't seem to be much. Thank you, sister, please also thank Kurama for me. Ruohuo's shadow clone number 1 obediently extended his hand. Kushina held it gently, and in the next second, the majestic chakra was poured directly into Shadow Clone. Shadow Clone immediately frowned. Even if it has 300% damage immunity, it can only withstand the power of one tail at most. After the first docking, chakra obviously has not yet reached the forced compatibility that Naruto had at the end of the Ninja War. Can your Shadow Clone hold up? Kushina frowned. I can't hold it on, but this is enough. Shadow Clone number 1 let go of his hand and turned to look at the main body. Now, the chakra amount of Shadow Clone number 1 is even higher than that of the main body. And also enjoys 300% damage immunity. Then I'll leave first. The distance of hundreds of kilometers has been spanned by Five Tails. At this time, Five Tails has rushed into the Sea of Fire, but this temperature is not difficult for Five Tails to bear. Moreover, Five Tails attacks very quickly, extinguishing a large number of flames wherever it goes. Shadow Clone 1 jumped directly from Five Tails, summoned a fire dragon in midair, and finally landed firmly. Does Lord Ruohuo plan to borrow these raging fires? Orochimaru saw Wakaki's intention. Wakaki can borrow the power of fire just like a water-style ninja borrows the power of water, regardless of whether it is the flame caused by the fire style. Well, eliminating the people who caused the fire and extinguishing the fire can always be done together. Fire is also a resource. It would be too wasteful to just burn the forest. Ruohuo said. The 1-minute cooling time was over, and he called out Shadow Clone number 2 again. Shadow Clone 2 continues to collect Nine Tails ambitions from Kushina, and then jumps in another field of fire. By the way, Ruohuo. Kushina suddenly remembered something. Why does that big fox call you Indra? Kushina had wanted to ask for a long time, do tailed beasts also like to call humans weird names? It's not a weird title. Ruohuo responded calmly. Only those with a pure will of fire can have this title. If you don't believe me, when we go to find Four Tails Jinchuriki later, Four Tails will also call me that. Saying that, Wakahuo looked at Orochimaru again. Teacher, as one of the future heirs of the Root organization, can I have my own code name? Of course. Orochimaru smiled and nodded. Indra is a good name. Do you want to use this title, Lord Ruohuo? That's not true, only the tailed beasts can call me that. Ruohuo waved his hand. Then what codename do you want to give yourself, Lord Wakaho? Orochimaru asked. Ruohuo frowned. He originally wanted to use Konoha Kwanhee, but recently he felt that Konoha Zuanlon was not bad, and it seemed a bit wasteful to use a codename to describe appearance. Ruohuo still wanted a more prestigious codename. So Ruohuo Kukudi said. Teacher, shouldn't the enemy give me a codename?